All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to get some background information on illuminated manuscripts. So let's start with the name of it. Illuminated manuscripts. They are called illuminated manuscripts because the word illuminate comes from the Latin word illuminare, which means to light up. So when you see one of these manuscripts in person, the term kind of makes sense. Because in the Middle Ages, which is when illuminated manuscripts were made, all books were handwritten original works of art. There were no printing presses. There were no mass producing. Everything was handwritten. They were called illuminated manuscripts because of their use of gold or silver leaf. If you notice the gold in these sections here, that's actually gold leaf. Gold leaf is when you take gold and you pound it down to as thin as paper, and then you glue it to the paper. So these manuscripts lit up when light hit them because all the shiny gold. At that time, very few people could read or write. So one reason for those highly illustrated texts is so that people could read along by looking at the images, kind of like a picture book. Many illuminated texts were copies of religious text for several reasons. Monasteries had monks who could read and write. At that time, the language that was read and written is Latin, which also monks could also read. Also, a church might have an illuminated manuscript so that they could use it as part of the ceremony of the Mass. So they'd go, when they were reading a section of it, they would show the images to help the people understand what was going on. Now, the whole process of book illumination was very time-consuming and costly. It could take a group of monks 6 to 8 months to create one illuminated manuscript. So it was a luxury item. It was only for wealthy customers. Wealthy people often had what were called a book of hours, which was prayers for different times of day. So it was smaller than a Bible, and it would just have the prayer, like the morning prayer and the evening prayer and the afternoon prayer. The invention of the printing press made books less expensive to make and more available to the public. Because books were more affordable and more available, more people learned to read. This eventually led to the illuminated manuscripts going out of style due to their cost and due to the fact that people could read, so they didn't really need a picture book anymore.
Type. An illuminator decorated the pages of a manuscript using paint and precious metals. He began only after a scribe had finished copying the text. The illuminator first sketched his design, then added details, such as the features of a figure or the interlacing of a decorated initial. Thin sheets of precious metals, like gold leaf, were always applied first. The illuminator put down a base coat, consisting of either a plaster-like substance called gesso or a gum, as shown here. Once the gum base dried, the moisture in the illuminator's breath was enough to make the small piece of gold leaf stick to the page. Then the illuminator brushed away the excess and polished the gold leaf. After applying the gold leaf, the illuminator painted his design. Each color was made from a vegetable dye or a mineral substance ground up and dissolved in liquid. The illuminator applied the paler shades first, then the darker tones. Once the illuminator applied black outlines and delicate white highlights to the figures and vines, the illumination was finished. After the scribes and illuminators had finished writing and decorating the parchment pages, the manuscript was bound. Groups of...
All right, so as you saw, that was how those pages were illuminated. Now, the book that we have looked at through our ASI was part of the Book of Kells. The Book of Kells is a manuscript containing the 4 Gospels. It is Ireland's most precious medieval artifact and is considered the finest surviving manuscript because it's been hundreds of years, and these are books made of vellum and paper. A lot of them did not survive. Presently, the Book of Kells is in Ireland. However, there are at least 5 competing theories about its place of origin, time of completion, and who actually made the thing. First, the book, or maybe even just the text part, may have been created in Iona, which is up here. It is an island off of Scotland. And then it was brought to Kells, where the illuminations may have been added. Second, another theory is that it was created entirely at Iona and eventually made its way to Kells when the monastery at Iona closed. Third, people think that it may have been created in Kells. Fourth, there are people that think it may have been created somewhere else north of England and then brought to Iona and then brought to Kells. And finally, it may have been created in some unknown monastery up here in Scotland and it ended up in Iona and Kells. We do know that at some point it was in Iona, and we do know that it ended up in Kells, which is where it lives now. Each Gospel of the Book of Kells begins with an incipit. An incipit is the first word of a section that is written in larger or more detailed than the rest of the text. You can see an example over here. That before the development of chapters or chapter titles, authors and scribes used incipits to divide a book. So they kind of showed you where each section began. They were often written in a different script or color from the rest of the work, and these incipit pages might be heavily decorated with illumination. Now we go back to your ASI presentations. The 4 pages that you looked at and presented on were 4 of the incipits from the Book of Kells. So now that we have some background information on the Book of Kells, let's discuss our images.